Section 1 of Death Talks Out of Turn. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. Section 1. Wartime Washington was quite restful until my wife Arabella arrived. Of course, there had been a certain upsetting quality about it, like living inside a concrete mixer, but until Arab arrived there had been positively no chance for me to win a decoration for valor. Posthumously. I didn't realize all that at the time. In fact, when she appeared, my thoughts went skipping off in a very different direction. I had visions of First Lieutenant Andrew Blake coming home from the War Department to a quiet apartment equipped with a blonde who can turn heads in a blackout. I pictured her bringing my slippers and putting 3 drops of bitters in my old-fashioned and nipping my left ear just hard enough. I figured that my troubles were over. I must have been nuts. 5 months of married life should have taught me better. Any time Mrs. Arabella Blake wraps a guy in cotton wool, he'd better not strike a match. It's likely to be gun cotton. Like most of Arab's actions, her arrival in Washington was unannounced. I was finishing up my work one evening in the Pentagon. Everybody else had left my branch, but I had to put on a war room show the next day, and so I was studying the latest cables from my theater of operations. As usual, the cables didn't give the answers to half the questions the general was certain to ask. Nobody could answer all his questions short of the German High Command. I was worrying along and not noticing things, including what felt like something brushing the back of my neck. A voice behind me complained. "Even if there are 8 girls to every man in Washington, when I kiss one, I expect to get his attention." I jumped up and gasped Arab, and grabbed her. For a minute, the Pentagon seemed to spin like a rickety merry-go-round. She laughed chokily and said, "Oh, Andy, if you'd been overseas, I could have managed, but I couldn't stand it just 140 miles away, and—" "I'd have dragged you down here 2 months ago," I growled. "But you said useless people shouldn't move to Washington." "I'm not going to be useless. I have a job as a secretary, and guess where? In the office of the Chief of Ordnance." I shivered slightly. Arab had always been wild about guns. A few years ago, she was All-American Women's Small-Bore Skeet Champion. When she said she's seen the cutest little number at 127.50, she isn't talking about a new evening gown. She's seen something with telescopic sights that goes bang. Now she'd probably take up the bazooka. "I'm not sure I like you working there," I said. "They have too many things you'll want to shoot." "But you are glad I'm here, aren't you?" I looked down into clear blue eyes. My heart blinked, and I wondered for the 100th time what she saw in me. She could have had her pick of the bright young junior partners and assistants to presidents along Philadelphia's main line, but she had chosen me. Me, Andy Blake, voted most unlikely to succeed by class at Old Nassau. Mirrors depressed me, but the last time I peeked, I was reminded that she hadn't chosen me for beauty. My sandy red hair likes to pretend it's a fez, and my features zigzag as if running away from something. The Blake body is long and gangly. The technical sergeant who gave me my final type physical exam seemed to be extra careful in his poking and prodding. I wouldn't even have been in the Army but for Arab. My field artillery commission from Princeton had died 4 years before Pearl Harbor, and not even my draft board had seemed interested in calling for Blake to save the country. But Arab had interrupted our honeymoon to uncover some dirty work in the antique furniture business, and it had turned out to be a scramble with a bunch of Himmler's stooges. We got a splash of publicity, and somebody in Washington decided I had a brain, and the Adjutant General acted on my application, and I got a telegram ordering First Lieutenant Andrew Blake to proceed to Washington, D.C., reporting for active duty in the War Department. Arab should have had the commission. All I did during our antique furniture trouble was duck bullets and blackjacks and yell for a lot of law at the right time. "Glad you're here?" I repeated. "Gosh, when you came in, Look, I can't say these things properly." "You could try. You could start courting me again, Andy. You only spent 2 weeks at it before we were married, and I always felt a little bit cheated." "Cheated? How about me on our honeymoon?" You got us in a shooting scrape so fast we almost saved money by using the wedding flowers for a joint funeral. You needed to be stirred up, Andy. You were in a rut, and I'm afraid you're in one now. You've been here 2 months. You're still a first lieutenant. No citations, no ribbons, not even a badge for pistol marksmanship. The way I handle guns, I said, I'll get a pistol badge and a military funeral at the same time. How is the war getting on, Andy? All right, I guess, she said softly. This is October 1942. The Japs may take back Guadalcanal. The Germans have half of Stalingrad. Rommel is way inside Egypt. The war is getting on all right, he says. You're getting fat, Andy. I bet your joints creak. In other words, I snapped, meet Lieutenant Blake of the Chairborne Infantry. No hero, just a guy doing a job that calls for a uniform. Am I supposed to win this war single-handed? You could try, and I'm going to find out how. But first we'll get a nice apartment and have fun, even if I do have to stir you up. I gulped. Arab stirs things up in a way which reminds me of dynamite. No apartment, I said. I have a feeling we'd better rent a foxhole. And meanwhile, we've got to find a place for you to stay. All I have is a room in a private house, you know. I have a room already, Andy. It's not half as hard to find a room here as they say. I never heard of anyone else having an easy time. Well, let's catch some dinner, and you can tell me about it. We drove into Washington and had shrimp Norfolk at O'Donnell's, and she told me all the details. She had arrived early in the morning, checked in at Ordnance, and had been given the rest of the day to get settled. And while I was looking for a place, she said, I heard somebody on a bus say that there was a vacancy at a place out on Northwest Q Street, so I went there and took it. I didn't know people in Washington talked out loud about vacant rooms. I thought they whispered. Well, I was sort of eavesdropping. I suspect I won't approve of this. I don't care, Andy Blake. I was doing a lot of bus riding and began to overhear things people shouldn't talk about. One man was talking about shipping 20 locomotives to England, for example. I took down some of the remarks in shorthand. I'm going to write letters to newspapers and do a report for everybody high up I can think of and make speeches and everything. It made me furious. Okay, I'm all for you. So, finally, you heard this vacant room mentioned. What's it like? It's in a big old house. 16 girls live there, and it's owned by a beautiful refugee French woman. And some of the girls are the cutest things, and I just know they're all going to make passes at you, and you'll have fun. Whoa, I said. You're peddling this too hard. Now, tell me what I'm not going to like about the place. Well, Mrs. Fielding, she married an American, won't rent rooms to married women. She says married women who really love their husbands are always either moping around or else rushing off in a few months to wherever their husbands are. And there she is with the trouble of finding the right girl again. Well, I'm signed up with the civil service under my maiden name anyway, so she got the idea that being Miss Arabella Reynolds, I'm not married. Well, that isn't like you. You know we'll be finding an apartment and leaving her flat and... Hey! What, Andy? What am I supposed to do while you're Miss Arabella Reynolds? She said demurely. You'll have to start courting me all over again. Do I have to win you 3 times in a row to get permanent possession? It might be nice. I groaned. Before I could upset her scheme, I'd have to find an apartment. And people in Washington tell you their apartment hunting troubles the way, in saner communities, they tell you the grim details of their operations. It might take months to find a place. Months during which I wouldn't even be a husband in name only. End of section 1. Section 2 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording's in the public domain. Section 2. We finished dinner and drove out to the house on Q Street. It was in a rather desolate section, quite a distance beyond Georgetown. There were only 3 houses in the block, each with several acres of unkempt grounds. Arab's house had been built maybe 30 years ago by someone who had hoped it would look like an embassy. It was a 3-story type, with a porte-cochere and oversized pillars sticking out like buck teeth. "How do you like it?" Arab asked, and shuddered. Ordinarily, I do the shuddering for our combination. If Arab was going in for it, something was wrong. "You're holding out on me," I said. "There's something you don't like about this place." Arab took a deep breath. "All right," she said. "You'll have to know anyway if you're going to help me. While I was eavesdropping on people talking on buses, I heard a man say, 'We're having trouble renting that vacant room at 5797 Q Street Northwest. 10 girls have applied so far, but none has been right.'" "What was the man like?" "He was short and fat and, I think, bald. He gave me the creeps. I don't really know why. Unless it was his glasses. They made him look blind. I suppose it was just the light was reflecting on them and you couldn't see his eyes through the lenses." "So you came out here to see why they were so choosy?" "Well, first I went through all the papers and found this room for rent ad." She handed me a torn piece of newspaper. I switched on the dashboard light and read, "Room for rent. Furnished room, breakfast and dinner optional, in fine old house, 5797 Q Street Northwest. Government girls only, must be single, highest type, cultured, prefer college or business school grad. Call or write giving full details. Mrs. R. Fielding." Arab said, "I came here and saw Mrs. Fielding. Before she rented me the room, we had a long talk about my background." "She was making sure you'd fit in, huh?" "That's what I was supposed to think, but that wasn't it. Andy, she was making sure my job in the War Department was important. What do you think about that?" "I think we'd better find you another place. I'll turn in a report and have the place checked." "We can't do that, Andy. If something is wrong here, it has to be looked into very quietly and patiently. We're the only ones who can do it. Honest. And nobody else would believe me. Or they might look into this business in a half-hearted way and wreck everything." "Well, that's better than having you wrecked. Because if you're right, if they're picking girls because they have important war jobs, you're trying to buy chips in a fast game."
"I'm still going to buy them."
"Not," I said grimly, "while I got my strength." I stepped on the starter. Arab flung open the car door and scrambled out.
"If you won't help," she choked, "I'll do it alone."
Her heels clattered on the walk and up the steps, and then the door opened and she was gone. I sat in the car without the slightest idea what to do. As I waited, the door of the Q Street house opened, and a rugged-looking guy came out. He was tall, with shoulders that crowded the doorway. He eased himself down the steps, limping slightly, and came over to my car.
"A guy wants to see outside, Jack," he said.
"Yeah?" I said. "I don't get it."
"This little desk bunny comes in crying, and I ask her what's up, and she says you give her a lift home and try to make her."
He was a good-looking guy. He had curls like yellow pine shavings, and the kind of arrogant face you can find on old Roman coins. And he was a phony. Guys of his type don't play Galahad unless there's something in it for them. I could figure out what it was in this case. He wanted to impress Arab. "Run along," I said, "and don't believe all you hear." He drawled,
"Are you coming out nice, or do I dig for you?"
I wasn't happy. The Army likes its officers to stay out of trouble, and has a few dozen regulations to that effect. But this case seemed to call for taking chances. I started to get out of the car on his side. That was a mistake. I was only half out when he hit me. My head bounced off the door frame and got caught in a cross-rip of short hooks. I fell forward and somehow found myself inside his guard. My head tucked itself automatically down on his shoulder. It seemed as good a place as any to sleep. For a couple of bleary moments I hung there. Then I found my head clearing. I had been doing a little instinctive work on his grocery section, and he didn't like it. He was trying to push me away. Well, that was swell. I got a good flat-footed stance and threw hooks at his middle. He was tough. It was like hitting a tire. He would take a lot of softening. I looked down, blinking. The guy had wilted. He was down. But he wasn't writhing slowly the way a man does when you really get to his groceries. He was sitting down, holding his knee.
"Get up,"
I snapped.
"Go to hell."
"Buddy," I growled, "if you don't get up, I'll—"
"What'll you do, kick me? Go on, Jack, kick me. It'll look swell in the Sunrise edition. Army lieutenant kicks helpless cripple."
"You're no cripple." He yanked up his right trouser leg and said,
"Well, there you are, Jack. Bad knee. And you know where I got it? Spain. I was flying an old crate for the Loyalists and knocking down Heinkels long before guys like you started wearing monkey suits."
He had a brace on his knee, but that needn't mean a thing. I've seen guys with braces rack up 10 baskets an evening in big league basketball. His Spanish story was the malarkey. He was a quitter, and in that Spanish unpleasantness no quitter would have flown an old crate long enough to knock down Heinkel's. "Get up," I said. "You're just yellow." He made an attempt, and then his face twisted and he grabbed his knee and moaned and collapsed. I was supposed to think he had passed out from pain. Of course, he was faking. He was breathing easily. I couldn't leave him there, though, so I picked him up and staggered to the house. The door opened and a cool voice said, "I'll show you his room, Lieutenant. I saw what happened." The speaker was a woman. Her face was in the shadow, but I could see a slim figure with legs that deserved a AAA priority on nylon. I followed her to a first-floor bedroom, conscious of girls hanging over the upstairs railing and whispering excitedly. I put him down on his bed. He moaned and sat up and said, "Get a doctor." "You are not hurt," she said. "Lie there and rest. Come with me, Lieutenant." We went into the hall, and she closed his door and said, "Let me fix your cuts." "I'm all right." "You are not all right. You have a cut over your left eye and a bleeding nose. Come along. My name is Mrs. Fielding." I lumbered down the hall after her. She didn't seem like a suspicious character. She opened a door and switched on a light in a small living room. She had delicate features, pale and clean as a cameo. Her hair was brushed straight back from forehead and temples, and then allowed to fall in a soft midnight blue wave. Her eyes had closed momentarily to shut out the light. She looked as if she hadn't slept in years. I watched her rummage through a closet. I never have much trouble remembering a pretty face, and I hadn't forgotten hers. She came back from the closet with absorbent cotton and Band-Aids and alcohol, and I said softly, "Do you still like those tall glasses of Café Nature and the tango and onion soup at Le Hall at 6 in the morning?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't seem curious. "What would be the use?" she said. "The Germans have Paris." "Shut me up if you want," I said. "But your name was Renee something or other, and you were a hostess at Zelli's, and half the college boys seeing Paris that summer were in love with you. It was August of '31. "You have a good memory." "Why not? You were Paris and mystery and all that." "I was 17 and fresh from a Breton fishing village and nothing more. What else do you remember?" "I remember we all tried to make you, and you laughed and had no time for anybody except a big happy-go-lucky kid from Dartmouth. He was half of one of their terrific pass combinations. What was his name?" "Bob. Bob Fielding." She said it so calmly that for a moment I didn't click. "Sure, Fielding," I said. "What happened to him? I don't remember him playing his senior year." "We were married," she said. "He didn't go back." I kept quiet. I didn't have a right to get curious. After a moment, she went on softly, almost to herself. "From our apartment you could see the sun rising over Notre Dame. We used to get up early to watch it, and have croissants and café au lait, and he would eat terrible numbers of eggs and go off to work on the Paris Herald. And then in 1937 something was happening in Spain that worried him, and he slipped across from Hendaye and joined the International Brigade and tried to stop one of Franco's dive bombers with a rifle. They found a button to send back to me, although, of course, it might not really have been his." She pulled up a chair and dipped the cotton in alcohol and said, "This may sting, Lieutenant." She began dabbing at my face. After she finished, she tilted my face to the light and studied it. I mumbled, "You won't remember my face. Nobody does." She gave a little start. "Oh, I'm afraid I wasn't even trying to remember you," she said. "That was not polite of me, was it? I was trying to remember a girl from Bretagne." She rose. I stumbled to my feet, and we turned toward the door. And there was Arab. Her feet were toeing in, and her fingers tightly laced, and her eyes wide and fearful. "I've been fixing up your lieutenant's cuts," Renee said. "Oh," Arab said, and she sounded relieved. "I know you two had some misunderstanding," Renee said, "but you ought to forget it. I think you'll like each other." "Well," Arab said. "I'll come back tomorrow night," I said. Arab murmured, "I want to fix up my room tomorrow night, but if Lieutenant Blake could help—" "Until 9 o'clock," Renee said briskly. "Your door must be ajar, and there's a little sign you have to hang up in the hallway. It says, visitors. Good night. Arab said, I was afraid she wanted you. What for, laughs? I didn't marry you for laughs, she said. I married you because... There was a rustling in the hall, and 2 girls went by whispering and peeking at us. I never had known why Arab married me, and now maybe I never would. We went out to the porch, and I told Arab about Renee Fielding. It's hard to figure her being in on a crooked game, I muttered. Yes, darling, it's always hard for a man to suspect a pretty woman of anything. She's not just pretty, she's a real guy. Even nice people can be forced into doing awful things, Andy. Today I happened to say to her that it must be terrible for the people in occupied France. She got pale. Would her parents still be there? In Brittany? Listen, Arab, you'd better calm down. I think you've imagined a lot of this. Did I imagine Joey Rader? How do you explain him living here? Well, I don't want to explain him. Do I know you well enough yet to kiss you? Well, no, but it's a nice way to... My hand had no more than touched her shoulders when the door opened and somebody said, I've been looking for you, Jack. Joey Rader was not going to be my best friend. What's the matter now? I said. He settled down on the porch rail in a permanent sort of way. It's this way, Jack. I kind of look out for the kids here, and... Arab looked at me hopelessly. I've got to get some sleep. Do you mind? I better go anyway, I said. I'll look out for her, Jack. I took a deep, relieved breath and started across the sidewalk to the car, and I almost bumped into a short, fat man. He was so fat that his arms stuck out at angles instead of hanging down. The street light reflected on his glasses and made him look blind. He passed me without a glance and turned into the next house 50 yards beyond the Fielding place. I shivered. That was one part of it Arab hadn't dreamed. I turned to go back into the house and then changed my mind. Arguing with Arab would only get me a sore throat. There were only 2 things I could do. Help her find out what was wrong with the house on Q Street, or find an apartment. Not just any old apartment would do now, either. To coax Arab from a haunted house, I'd need an apartment with full-length mirrors and dozens of closets and a view of the firing ranges at Aberdeen Proving Ground. I didn't have much hope of getting time off the next day to hunt apartments, and it turned out I was right. My Middle Eastern theater was getting hot, what with the British 8th Army getting ready to tangle with Rommel at El Alamein. I had to put on a war room show for the general at 11. It's quite a job. You stand in front of a room full of rank and give a summary, and then play target while questions smoke at you like tracer bullets. The general fooled me. I was up on the Egyptian and Cyrenaica sectors, but he wanted to know about Sicily and Pantelleria and Sardinia. How active were Axis reconnaissance planes based there? I didn't know, and spent the afternoon finding out. It was nearly 8 in the evening when I got to the house on Q Street. Arab and I went up to her room. She left the door ajar, explaining, When we have men visitors, the door must be open at least 6 inches. If you could read my mind, you'd take the thing off its hinges. Arab's face wrinkled in crying lines. She shut the door, flicked off the light, and groped her way into my arms. This isn't any easier for me than it is for you, she sobbed. Then let's stop this nonsense and... Andy, we've got to find out what's wrong here. For once, couldn't we find out what's right? Let's find out that the body in the bathtub is only a guy who couldn't find any other place to sleep in Washington. Let's find out that Joey Rader is just a good-looking 4F who tends the furnace and... Joey, Arab said, would be out on his ear if Renee Fielding had her way. I overheard a private scrap they had this morning. She told him to leave, and he just laughed at her. That made the official explanation for Joey look silly. The official story is that a man is needed around the house, just as you said. Doesn't he work? Yes, there's a clipping bureau near here where he has a job. What do the other girls think? Half of them are so nuts about him that they don't think. The others think Renee Fielding is in love with him. Did you hear his yarn about flying for the Loyalists in Spain? He was in Spain. I had a chance to take a quick snoop through his room, and he's got 6 snapshots against backgrounds that really are Spanish. In uniform? Flying jacket and helmet. Footsteps sounded in the hall. The door was opened and the light switched on. It was Joey. He said, We got rules in this shack. Mrs. Fielding said I should come up and tell you to quit playing blackout. I growled, How would you like a smack on the jaw? He laughed.
Get this, Jack. I don't feel like going the distance with you every night. Take a poke at me and your CO will hear about it from Mrs. Fielding.
I took a steadying breath and said, "Okay, Joey, you win. So run along."
Not me, Jack. You're the one who's running along. Mrs. Fielding says make it another night when you know the rules better.
I edged my left foot forward as a pivot and cleared the tracks quietly for a right hook. But 110 pounds of blonde baggage suddenly clamped my arm.
"We're very sorry," Arab cooed at Joey. "We just turned out the light to look at the stars." "Sister, I don't blame Jack here. For my money, he's a piker. In his spot, I'd have blown out every fuse in the joint. But Mrs. Fielding says he scrams for tonight."
"Good night, Lieutenant," Arab said. "Before I go, I'm going to—"
"Good night,"
Arab said firmly, and then suddenly giggled. "Very well," I said icily. "If you will allow me to detach my arm, I will leave." Arab stepped back and said,
"Of course."
I got outside without seeing anybody and crossed the street to the gates of a big estate. There was an old-fashioned horse-mounting block at the gate, and I sat down on it to think things out. By now I knew I had acted like a fool. I sat there working up courage to go back and apologize. Then the front door opened, and Joey and Arab came out, arm in arm laughing. They climbed into a roadster and drove off. I trudged off to my bus stop. End of section 2. Section 3 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 3. During the next morning, I had to fight against an urge to call Arab. I won the fight, but I didn't feel proud about it. Finally, at 11:30, she called. She said,
"I'm sorry about last night, Andy."
"That's all right. Any trouble with Joey?"
Why, no. You'll be around early tonight, won't you?"
Things are piled up here. You know how things can get."
Yes, I do," she said brightly. "Well, you'll give me a call sometime, won't you? After all, we do have something in common. A marriage license, I believe."
"Sure, I'll do that. Goodbye." The rest of the day dragged along at a chain-gang pace. I had a cafeteria dinner in which everything tasted as flat as water, and decided to hang around the house on Q Street waiting for Arab to get in a jam. When I arrived there, I wandered along the opposite side of the street and spotted Joey's roadster. Seeing it gave me a senseless feeling of relief. The guy could be making as much time with Arab inside the house as in his car. I settled down on the horse-mounting block, and I hadn't been there 15 minutes when Arab and Joey came out and drove away on their second date. This time I couldn't afford to take my toys and go home mad. I waited. It was a still night. So when the silence was ripped apart, I was on my feet even before I had identified the noise. Across the street, in the shaggy grounds of the Fielding house, a woman had screamed. It was just a splinter of sound. Something stopped the scream as fast as if her vocal cords had snapped on the fourth or fifth vibration. I ran across the street and plunged into the unkempt garden. 50 feet away, a man was dodging behind a tree. I sprinted toward him. He was short and squat, but he wheeled on me like a cat. His hands gripped me, and trees and sky and ground pinwheeled. I hit dirt 10 feet past him and managed to roll most of the shock out of the impact. When I scrambled up, he was waiting in an odd, hunched position. His fingers stroked the air in front of him, felt it, almost like a pianist testing keys. My memory groped for a picture I'd seen once, a picture done on shiny rice paper. There had been a short, fat man in the same hunched pose. He had been naked except for a G-string, and his belly had looked enormous. In the background, the artist had painted a tiny white-capped mountain. Fujiyama. This was the way Jap wrestlers waited. A woman's voice lashed at us. "Stop it!" Renee Fielding came out from behind the tree. She gripped the man's shoulder and shook him. He turned his head slowly to her, almost as if he had been awakened. Starlight washed over his round, polished skull and glittered blankly on his glasses. It was the man Arab had overheard on the bus, the one I'd almost bumped into last night. He dropped his hands. I beg your pardon, Lieutenant," he said.
You came at me so fast, and I failed to note your insignia."
"A woman screamed," I said. "Was it you, Mrs. Fielding?"
"Something ran through the bushes. A rabbit, perhaps, or a cat. I'm nervous."
There was a fear in her eyes, but no sign of nervousness. I asked, "Would you like me to see you into the house?"
"No," she said. "One moment," the fat man said. "Perhaps you think she does not want to be out in the garden with me. Is that it? Is it?"
He was breathing hard, pushing against me. "I don't know anything about it," I snapped. "I just asked Mrs. Fielding if—"
"You think a fat man is a joke?" he said. "You think his brain does not work fast and that women are not interested in him? She is out here with me because that is what she wants. Don't you, Renee?" "Of course," she said in her tired voice. "In fact, you—" "Please," she said, "Lieutenant Blake is not interested." "My dear Renee, I do not like you to be stubborn. Perhaps you are forgetting that—" "No," she said quickly, "I have not. It is just that being put on display—" "How do you feel about me?" she said tonelessly. "I love you." She moved up close to him and stroked his shoulder and kissed him. She moved like something wound up with a key. The fat man looked at me, nodding. I thought of the big clean kid from Dartmouth, and of his girl, and of the way she had laughed at the rest of us back in '31 when we tried to make her. "Good night," I said. "Wait a minute," the man said. "I have not apologized properly for my foolish actions, but you were also very foolish." "You're telling me." "Yes, foolish. Never run at an enemy that way. Come more slowly, otherwise—" He picked up a dead branch and asked, "Can you break this with your hands?" It was an inch thick and the wood was still sound. I tried to snap it and failed. He took it and braced one end against the ground. The edge of his right palm chopped at it. There was a crack and the branch broke. "I wish I'd known that stunt when I was a kid in the Pine Tree Patrol," I said. "We had little scout hatchets, and I was always chopping myself instead of wood." The fat man said, "You did not understand. We were assuming that this was a man's neck." "Doesn't look as if he ever washed it." He stared at me and began chuckling. "That is good," he said. "You should learn to fight as well as you can make jokes." "Then I can make people listen to my jokes, huh?" "Your mistake," he said, "is hitting a man with a fist. The fist is broad. It spreads the impact over too much space." I shook my head. I wasn't arguing with him. I was testing my vertebrae, but he thought I doubted his story. "You do not agree," he said. "Why does the point of a knife stab a man?" "Because it's sharp." "Exactly. Because the impact is limited to a tiny area. I have spent years toughening the edges of my palms the way the Japanese do. They start by trying to split thin boards. By the time they become experts in judo, they can split a thick board. But what do you think will happen when an American soldier has to fight a judo expert?" "Well, he might be tempted to shoot the Jap." "Yes, of course. We will hope it turns out that way. And we will hope that the stupid, old-fashioned Prussian generals keep on neglecting judo training." He dropped the broken stick. "I believe Renee called you Lieutenant Blake. My name is Jones." That disappointed me. Jones was too normal and American. "I'm one of the Jones boys, keeping up with the Joneses. This is the Army, Mr. Jones." "Professor Jones?" I asked. "It is just plain Mr. Jones." Plain Mr. Jones. I liked that. You would immediately suspect a man who called himself plain Mr. Jones, just as you would start counting the silverware if somebody introduced himself as Honest John Smith. Renee said, "Mr. Jones lives next door. Joey works for him." Plain Mr. Jones asked, "Perhaps you live near here?" "No, I live in Virginia, near Falls Church." Renee said, "Lieutenant Blake comes over to visit Miss Reynolds." He nodded. Then his forehead creased, and he asked, You visited her tonight?" Apparently he knew who Arab was, and that she was out with Joey. "No," I said hastily.
I haven't seen her tonight. I was out this way visiting friends and thought I'd give her a hail on my way back," Renee said.
"She's out with Joey."
"Oh."
"I'm sorry about last night," she said. "We do have rules, you know."
"Yeah, sure. Well, I'll run along." Plain Mr. Jones said,
"Why don't you invite Lieutenant Blake to the picnic tomorrow night?" "Oh, do you think—" "Of course. Tell him about it."
She said almost reluctantly,
"The weather is still so nice that I decided to give the girls and their friends a picnic supper in Rock Creek Park tomorrow night. Everybody here will be at the picnic. I would like you to come."
"I'd like to," I said, "but of course work might pile up."
"Please try anyway."
She gave me directions how to get there and added,
"We always have extra girls, so if...
"Sure," I said. "Joey's giving me tough competition, isn't he? I'll try to make it if I can. And thanks very much."
7 o'clock, Lieutenant."
Arab didn't call me the next day, and I couldn't make myself call her. What was there to say? That I loved her and was moping around like a lost puppy? There isn't much glamour about a lost pup, at least not when a guy like Joey Rader is around. After dinner, I got the car. There was a mystery in the house on Q Street. Everybody would be at the picnic, and I was going to go through that house like a vacuum cleaner. A block away from the house, I pulled to the curb, switched off the motor. I put on a field jacket and left my service cap in the car so that I wouldn't be showing any insignia. The house on Q Street thrust black angles into the night sky. Its outline looked more like an unfinished jigsaw puzzle than like a dwelling. I circled the place and found quite a number of unlocked windows. Just for fun, I tested the front door. The latch moved easily under my thumb. Things couldn't have been arranged more conveniently. I started to push the door open, and then my nerves began snapping like old rubber bands. Things couldn't have been arranged more conveniently. And maybe they had been arranged. I backed away from the door. My foot skidded on something, and I picked up a dead branch neatly broken in the middle. I held the thing like a person taking lesson number 1 in snake charming. Plain Mr. Jones had been practicing. The branch gave me a start on an interesting theory. Perhaps Plain Mr. Jones and his friends suspected that somebody was unusually curious about the house on Q Street. So Renee Fielding arranged a picnic for everybody. That would give the suspect a tempting opportunity to prowl through the place. If my theory was correct, the dark house was a booby trap, and Plain Mr. Jones was waiting inside. But the theory needed a test. I crept off the porch and sneaked around the house, quietly opening the unlocked windows. Then I settled down behind an evergreen to watch. Finally, a nearby window began closing slowly, silently. A face appeared in the window. Starlight gleamed on the china bowl head and blank glasses of Plain Mr. Jones. I knew the logical move now was to take a look through the fat man's house while he was chasing shadows in the Fielding place. So I made a wide circuit to the side of his house away from the Fielding grounds. His house was a Victorian type with gables at each end, like ears pricked up to listen. No lights were showing. It wasn't likely that his place had been turned into a booby trap too. I climbed onto the porch. A small brass plate beside the door announced, "Jones Newspaper Clipping Service." The front door was locked, but one window was unlocked toward the rear of the house. I opened it, climbed in, and listened. There was no sound except my heart, which was imitating a dishpan falling downstairs. I made sure of a line of retreat by unlocking all doors and windows, then probed around with my flashlight. The entire first floor had been turned into office space. There were more than a dozen desks, each with stacks of newspapers and scissors and trays of pins and neat piles of clippings. At a guess, he clipped half the dailies in the country. I went upstairs and examined a big study, presumably used by Plain Mr. Jones. A bust of Caesar scowled from a table. One wall was paneled with books. I checked the wastebasket and found a crumpled sheet of paper containing 2 scribbled notes. "Betty, I hope I can make it, but we've been working late a lot of nights. Genevieve, it's a wonder to me that trains aren't even more crowded these days, but maybe people are learning to stay home." That meant nothing to me, but I put it in my pocket for luck. Then some bits of paper on the floor near the window caught my attention. Plain Mr. Jones had torn up a newspaper clipping, violently. The pieces were crumpled. The carbon smudges of a heel hinted that he had ground the paper into the carpet. I pieced the clipping together. The story was based on a recent broadcast, picked up by the FCC by a station inside Germany. A man calling himself Gustav Siegfried Eins had told the German people that if only Hitler would kick out that Schwein Himmler and his Gestapo, all Germany's troubles would be over. He put in a plug for Germany's old-school generals and admirals, even mentioning Admiral Canaris of German naval intelligence by name. They'd have won the war by now, the commentators said, but for Himmler's bungling. I had heard of those Gustav Siegfried Eins broadcasts. While the station was supposedly secret, it was obvious that it couldn't last for any time without high sponsorship. There were plenty of hatreds inside Germany, and one of the most deadly seemed to be between Himmler's crowd and the German high command. It was interesting that the fat man had ripped it up so violently. You wouldn't have thought that the broadcast would irritate anybody except Himmler and his gang. I switched off the flashlight and peered out of the window to see if things were still quiet. I could just barely see the Fielding house across the intervening stretch of trees and shrubs. Its windows had all been closed now. I watched, and suddenly my spine turned into a long knobby icicle. Something had stirred in the shaggy garden. A figure was stealing toward the Fielding house. My brain went into reverse gear, telling me things I shouldn't do. It reminded me that I didn't know who the prowler was. It told me that shouting would tip off the fat man as well as the prowler. The figure in the shrubbery slipped across a starlit space. I stopped breathing. The pale light glimmered on slim legs and shoulder-length blonde hair. The prowler was Arab. I didn't think anything out. My hand hooked a straight wooden chair and slammed it at the window. It went through in a crashing spray of glass. I stuck my head in the opening and let out a yell that scalded my throat. I raced through the second floor, flipping on light switches. A whip cracked beside my ear, and there was a slamming sound, and plaster smoked from a small hole in the wall. I dived to the floor. The guy could shoot. Suddenly every light in the house went out. A master switch had been thrown. The fat man must have streaked out of the Fielding house and over here the moment his shot missed me. I could picture him creeping up the stairs, feeling the air ahead of him with pudgy fingers. I got up and papered myself against a wall of the study. My best chance was to wait for him to make a noise. There was little chance of help coming. In this neighborhood of big estates, a distant shot would pass as a car backfiring. Minutes passed. Everything I owned was busy making a clatter. Seconds stomped by on my watch like tiny one-legged men. My breathing was getting louder too, like a guy in the last stages of asthma. I decided to stop that nonsense and quit breathing. The breathing sounds went on. The fat man was somewhere near me. It isn't easy to locate a man by the sound of his breathing, but I could make a guess. I stood quite still and felt slowly out on both sides for a weapon. My fingers touched the bust of Caesar. I lifted the thing and found it heavy but manageable. I crouched, held the bust up and away from my body, and crept out from the wall. If I had spotted the fat man's position correctly, I would pass between him and the dull gray rectangles of the windows. It ought to make a nice silhouette. I moved 2 steps, 3, 4, 5. Everything happened at once. Caesar twisted out of my fingers, and a shock numbed my arm, and the fat man screamed. He had mistaken Caesar for me. He had leaped and clipped it. I stumbled toward the spot where the door ought to be and rammed into a wall. I yanked the flashlight from my pocket and swept its beam around the room. In the middle of the room, the fat man seemed to be wrestling insanely with himself. I didn't get it. Not until his pocket ripped and his left hand swung out gripping a revolver. A lot had happened in about 10 seconds. I was still dizzy and my thoughts were a couple of seconds behind the action. There was a blast of sound and a flash 2 feet from my face. Caesar's plaster of Paris head exploded into fragments. Somebody had spoken, too. Had snapped.
"Drop it fast!"
The fat man's gun clattered on the floor. A voice whispered in my ear. A familiar voice. It said,
"Keep that light in his eyes."
I nodded and did as I was told. Down at floor level, a hand reached into the cone of light and scooped up the revolver. A girl's hand. It had been Arab who had spoken. Plain Mr. Jones wasn't moving. We had been lucky. With that light in his eyes, he couldn't have any idea how we looked, and he couldn't identify Arab from 3 words. Arab's heels rattled downstairs. I thumbed off the light and raced after her. We burst outdoors and ran down the street. There was no sound from behind us. We climbed in the car and let it play Jeep for a couple of blocks. I drove silently, conscious of Arab's edging closer to me and peeking up at my face. I wanted to grab her and tell her that she was a little idiot, and I was a big one, but it wouldn't make any sense. Not with Joey Rader in the picture. Just then she switched off the ignition and took the key. The car coasted to a halt. I frowned at her.
"That was a hint," she said meekly.
"Thus we'll acknowledge receipt of your hint of October 22nd, I said. "It is regretted that no action can be taken at the present time."
"Andy, if I didn't mean anything to you, you wouldn't be taking such care of me."
"I'm just trying to save a good secretary for the War Department."
"I'm not a good secretary."
"Oh, sure you are. Nowadays any girl's a good secretary if she can change a typewriter ribbon without hanging herself."
"I don't want to talk about secretaries," she wailed. "All I wanted was for you to kiss me, and you talk about secretaries, and I'm all mixed up."
"Oh, you're just upset by this mess tonight. You think I kept you out of some grief, and you're sort of grateful, and..."
"I'm not grateful, and if I don't mean anything to you, what are you saving me for?"
I growled. "For Joey Rader." It was like slapping her face. She took a short, quivering breath and held it, and stared at me.
"Oh, darling," she said, "you haven't been worrying about him?"
"Sure, I know it was silly. People start carving everything out of me that makes me tick, but it's nothing to worry about."
"Andy, if that's the only thing wrong, we can settle it fast. I wouldn't trade one of your 9 p.m. yawns for all the pretty speeches Joey could make. I wanted to find out what he knew."
I began to feel better. "He makes pretty speeches, huh?"
"Yes, mostly about himself. I only went out with him to..." "Oh, you must have known about that. Is that why you've been acting so queerly?"
"Uh-huh. I saw you both times. I wasn't really snooping on you, just keeping an eye on things. Gosh, and all I could think was..." She said wistfully,
"Is this a good time to ask for a reconsideration of my hint of October 22nd?
I grabbed her so fast that I almost took the steering wheel with me. I kissed her lips and the warm, pulsing hollow of her throat. End of section 3. Section 4 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording's in the public domain. Section 4. Finally, I let her go and grumbled. "We've got to be sensible. Won't Joey be suspicious about where you've been?"
"He tried to teach me a lesson by going off with another girl, and the others are scattered all over 10 acres by now. Nobody could check upon anybody else."
That sounded logical. The Jones boys probably had no interest in who went where at the picnic. It must have seemed sufficient to set just one trap in the Fielding house. I told Arab I had an invitation to the picnic, and could show up with her without causing any suspicion. I changed back into uniform, and we drove out Rock Creek Parkway while I gave her an account of all my activities.
She said, "If you go on like this, they'll be putting you in intelligence."
"If I go on like this, they'll be putting me in Arlington National Cemetery. And what I've found out doesn't add up to anything."
"Oh, but it does. We know that plain Mr. Jones works for Himmler, and probably clips military news and sends it to Germany. He has a hold over Renee and makes her do some of the dirty work. He employs Joey Rader in his clipping bureau, and Joey coaxes his girlfriends to talk out of turn. How's that?"
"It's the hottest collection of libel that ever burned my ears."
"At least, Andy, you can't deny that your plain Mr. Jones tried to kill you. There used to be a law against that."
"He was protecting his house against a burglar. It's legal." She sighed.
"All right, darling. Now what do we do?"
I march up to my colonel tomorrow and tell all."
"Oh, Andy, we were doing so nicely by ourselves."
"Get this," I said. "The war is not billed as Arab versus Axis. Lots of people feel they own a piece of it, too. What have you found out?"
"Not very much. I found a couple of letters from abroad in Renee's room. My French is terrible, but they seem to be from her parents in Brittany."
Our arrival at the picnic caused no comment, and the rest of the evening was peaceful. The first thing the next morning, I told my chief, Colonel Parker, everything that had happened. He listened gravely and said, "Your wife certainly can stir things up, can't she? This is out of my field. We'll have to take it somewhere else." He made a phone call, and then led the way to a quiet office filled with officers wearing General Staff Corps stars and silver leaves and eagles. Things seemed very ominous, and as I repeated the story, I kept reassuring myself that if it were a court-martial, they would have swords. I finished and spread my 2 scraps of evidence on a desk, the clipping about the clandestine German radio station, and the paper with the scribbled lines reading, "Betty, I hope I can make it, but we've been working late a lot of nights. Genevieve, it's a wonder to me that trains aren't even more crowded these days, but maybe people are learning to stay home." Nobody spoke for a minute. Finally, a discussion started. "Not much to go on, is there?" "You can take it up bit by bit, and it's all quite legal." "Those scraps of conversation don't mean a thing by themselves." "What do you know about this man Jones?" "Just that he runs a clipping bureau, nothing on the books against him." "The question is he sending anything of value to the enemy out of the country? That's a point to check." "We'll look into it, sir. And about this man Raider and Mrs. Fielding. Apparently he was in the Spanish fighting, and she came over from France in the past 2 years. The State Department may have some ideas." "Lieutenant?"
"Sir?" I squeaked.
"Lieutenant, you will refrain from any further independent operation in this matter. If you observe anything of interest, report it to your commanding officer. That's all."
"Sir," I said weakly, "what am I going to tell my wife?"
"Your wife?"
"Oh, yes. Oh, yes." Somebody seemed dubious about Arab.
"Enthusiastic girl, isn't she?"
"Yes, sir."
"Tell her there's nothing to the spy angle and to stop playing detective. Safest thing, don't you think, gentlemen? In view of her enthusiasm?"
"Sir," I stammered, I don't think it will work."
"What?"
"Sir, you don't know Mrs. Blake."
"Nonsense. Of course it will work. Let her understand that you'll be held responsible for her conduct."
Later in the day, I grabbed time for a beverage bar date with Arab and carried out my instructions. She was very docile about it, which should have warned me, but didn't. During the next 7 days, nothing happened at the house on Q Street. I spent every evening there and noted only one suspicious thing. Arab wanted to sit around and talk or play cards instead of going out dancing or to the movies. The war was getting hot, though. Montgomery had just launched a drive against Rommel in Egypt. Guadalcanal was boiling. The Marines and Navy had Japs in their hair, and an army task force might be on the way. Halfway around the world, Stalingrad hung in the balance. Maybe a huge convoy had steamed up the Persian Gulf, and an American army had crossed Iran and was getting ready to flood down on the German flank from the Caucasian passes. The Germans were clearing the Flanders coast of civilians. A couple of correspondents in London had tried to file stories about Eisenhower buying clothes suitable for a Norwegian winter. The Axis shortwave propaganda was filled with screamed warnings to Dakar on the western bulge of Africa. Then, after a week's lull on the Q Street front, Arab sprung her surprise. The fireworks started because I found an apartment which would be available in a week. I had lunch with Arab and told her. She didn't seem happy about it. "It means leaving the house on Q Street," she said. "I hate the place, but I'll be walking out on a job that needs to be done."
I told her it was all her imagination and merely made her more angry. Only one thing would have done any good, to tell her that the spy angle was being carefully investigated, and I was under orders not to tell her that. She said finally,
"Let's not talk about it any more. Bring the car tonight, Andy. I feel like getting out. Make it right at 7, will you? I don't want to hang around after dinner."
"Okay." After work, I grabbed a bus to my quarters and got the car. The Crowleys, who were getting ready for a night out, hinted that it would be all right with them if I wanted to bring Arab back to the house for a quiet session of two-handed gin rummy. Understanding people, the Crowleys. I drove back toward Washington, and the thought of an evening alone with Arab worked on my heart like a shot of adrenaline. End of section 4. Section 5 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 5. It was just before 7 when I stopped in front of the house on Q Street. Before I could get out of the car, Arab came down the front steps. She was almost skipping.
"Darling," she gasped, "the timing was perfect. Now we've got to move. Fast."
I said stupidly, "Huh?"
"This is a getaway, darling. Hurry up or we'll be followed."
Butterflies began dancing in my stomach, or maybe bats. We swung away from the curb with yowling gears, and I grumbled, "What's the program?"
"First we go to your quarters, Andy."
I wish you meant that the way I was going to mean it.
"Why, Andy, had you planned to take me there?"
Well, the Crowleys are out for the evening, and I thought we could go there and be alone, and... Arab gave a sinister laugh.
"We won't be alone,"
she said. "All right," I said gloomily. "Let's have it." She sat forward happily on the edge of the car seat, like a little girl telling a ghost story to her friends. I provided the circle of wide staring eyes.
"It's like this," she said. "The masterminds decided that there wasn't any spy angle, so I decided to dig up proof."
"You can have a front seat at my court-martial."
"They won't court-martial you if I'm right."
"I get it. The Army only shoots me if you're wrong. If you're right, the spies shoot me. I got about as much future as a fruit fly." She ignored me.
"There are," she said, 16 girls in the house on Q Street. You know how carefully Renee Fielding picked us? We're all from important agencies of the government. We all have important jobs, and we all like to chatter."
"You girls don't toss around secret information, do you?"
It's hard to explain, Andy. I've never heard any of them consciously tell any secrets. But when you chatter a lot, things slip out. Little things. They might not mean anything to the average listener."
I stirred around in my memory. That hunk of paper I picked up in the fat man's house. What were those 2 notes on it?
One was about a girl named Betty who said she had been working late a lot of nights. The other was about a girl named Genevieve who wondered why trains weren't getting more crowded. Are you interested to know that we have a Betty who works in operations in the War Department, and a girl named Genevieve who works in Transportation Corps?"
"Yeah, I'm interested. Those remarks might make you think that operations was bringing something to a boil, and that troop movements had increased."
"And do you think plain Mr. Jones might be interested?"
"Maybe."
"Oh, don't be so poky. He takes remarks like that and things he learns from his clipping bureau and plays jigsaw puzzle."
"I'll turn in a report on it."
"Darling, you won't have time. I elected you to be bait."
"Bait?"
"All week I've been keeping a diary. Every time I heard one of the girls drop one of those innocent remarks, I noted it down. I've quite a collection. I have it right here, and I did a translation for you today."
"Do your notes look hot?"
"I don't know."
"Then what's all this about bait?"
"Oh, the notes are only part of it. That's to prove that an agent could pick up information in the Fielding house. The bait part comes in proving that they are picking up information. You won't be angry, will you, Andy?"
"Sure, I'll be angry. Will it do me any good?"
No. You see, at dinner I spilled everything. I babbled about how I was going out with you tonight, and how I'd have to be ever so careful what I said, because you had told me you were horrified by the loose talk going on, and had spent every evening in the past week noting down every bit of information we girls let slip. And of course, I said you weren't doing it directly for intelligence, but just sort of on your own, and would take it up with intelligence when you got a real collection. And I said you had all your notes at your quarters, and had invited me to come up and see them tonight, but I giggled and said of course I wouldn't dream of going to your rooms.
"Friends," I said, "meet the Widow Blake."
"So we're going back to your quarters and wait in ambush."
"I'll be right with you, just as soon as I can run down to Fort Knox and borrow an armored division."
"Darling, if you think you can get help, I'm all for it."
That startled me. It was the first time Arab had ever admitted we might need help for anything. I tried to imagine how our story would sound to some high ranker of the military district of Washington. He would listen politely, and the next thing a doctor would be tapping my kneecap to see if the reflex was normal. "With that story," I muttered, "a guy would be a fool to lend us even 1 MP.
"So we have to do it alone, Andy, and we've got to do it. This is our one chance to make Joey and his boss come out into the open. If they raid your room, we've got evidence."
"What makes you think they'd pull a raid? They might decide it's a trap."
"That's just it. They've got to find out if it's a trap. Because the mere setting of a trap would mean they're suspected."
I couldn't decide whether her reasoning was sound or not. At any rate, we had to give her plan a chance. We would go to Crowley House and study Arab's diary. If it contained anything of real importance, we could get some fast action from the War Department. "Okay," I said. "Put on your wedding ring, Mrs. Blake. We're about to play house."
"Darling, you're wonderful. They ought to hang a medal on you."
"They can hang a blonde on me. More practical. Any offers?"
"One,"
Arab said, snuggling close.
"and that's all there had better be."
The Crowley House sits on a knoll out beyond Falls Church, with 30 acres of Virginia farmland to itself. We turned off the main road onto a hedge-bordered lane. I cut through a gap in the hedge and drove bumpily back over the meadow, paralleling the lane as far as possible. That got my well-known green coupe far enough away from the house to escape anything but a thorough search. We walked the remaining few hundred yards to the Crowley place and found it quiet and deserted. "Let's see your notes," I said. Arab spilled the contents of her handbag on the table. I picked up the notebook and sheaf of typed paper. "Bring the rest and let's go to the cellar," I said.
"Can't we stay here?"
I began pulling down the shades on the first floor and explained, "We can't let any lights show. The cellar has blackout shades." We turned off the first floor lights and went downstairs. I adjusted the blackout shades over the cellar windows. We settled down in a couple of wicker chairs, and I began reading the typed translation of Arab's notes. She had done quite a job. There were dozens of quotes on everybody in the Fielding house. "How did you remember all this?" I asked.
"It wasn't hard, Andy. If I were reading, I made shorthand notes on the page. I used to keep 2 kinds of score when we played bridge. After meals, I made notes as soon as I got away. And of course, I only picked certain things to remember."
It took a long time to go through her notes. Trying to find something important in that mass of words was like peeling layer after layer of paint from an ancient canvas to see if one of the layers might have been done by a Rembrandt. I read them again, and this time I checked every quote with a list which identified the job held by each girl. When I finished, my skin was prickling. Something was there. I said, "Look at this," and pointed to a conversation Arab had recorded that morning. She had written, "Jane, finishing breakfast. Hamdullah." "Evelyn, what did you say?" Jane, "Hamdullah. Moslems say it after every meal." Marjorie, "Turning Moslem on us, are you?" I wouldn't like that. Don't the women have to wear veils and horrible drab clothes like tents?" Jane, "Well, yes, outdoors, but underneath they wear nice bright zippy things they can only show when they're at home." Evelyn, "Think how they must swelter." Jane, "Oh, I don't know. They have mountains in Morocco and Algeria, and it snows in winter, and you could even go skiing." Mrs. Fielding, "How interesting. Where do you girls learn all these things? You make me feel quite ignorant." Jane, "I just picked it up somewhere, I forget." "Why," I asked, "did you take that down?" Arab said, "It sounded out of character for Jane. I've never seen her read anything but fashion magazines, and she doesn't have the world's greatest memory. We were talking about Iceland once, and she thought it was at the North Pole." "According to your cast of characters, she works for a special service. What does she do there?"
"Once she said something about her branch putting out books for soldiers."
"What kind of books?"
"She didn't say."
I muttered, "Special Service put out a pocket guide to England, and one for Ireland. Wouldn't it be interesting if they were putting out a pocket guide to Morocco and Algeria?"
"But, Andy, we haven't any troops there."
I didn't say anything. Arab stared at me for a moment, then whispered,
"We don't have any troops there yet. Is that it?"
"Maybe."
"Andy, they wouldn't let a girl like Jane in on secret plans."
"Of course they wouldn't. But somebody's got to do the filing and typing and mimeographing. If there's an operation, maybe only 10 or 12 men in the War Department might know the entire story, but thousands of people know little bits of it. Put the bits together and you've got the whole story."
"Darling, it could be Norway or West Africa or France or a lot of places. They're all mentioned somewhere in my notes. Why do you pick Morocco and Algeria?"
I muttered. It was just a feeling. I kept reading the notes over and over, and got the feeling there was a pattern in them. And then this conversation suddenly went click, and the pattern was North Africa. There must be other remarks that fit, and that's what we've got to check. We divided up the pages and spread them out on the ping-pong table and went through them. We jotted down remarks that fit the pattern on pages from the back of Arab's notebook and scribbled comments about the remarks. We traded items and tossed some away after a discussion, and went back and got others we'd passed up at first. Probably we missed things because we didn't have the necessary background knowledge to interpret them, but that couldn't be helped. End of section 5. Section 6 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. It's LibriVox recordings in the public domain. Section 6. When we were finished, we were pretty sure of what we had. No remark made the grade unless we knew that the speaker might have inside information on the point in question. We sorted out the items on the green table and numbered them. I read the numbered notes over carefully. 1. Remark. People think they're not getting much gas now, but just wait. So much oil will be needed that we'll have to cut the A cards way down from 4 gallons, and maybe the B cards too. Comments. Works for Office of Petroleum Coordinator. Me. An invasion would take a lot of oil. Arab. Could she mean submarine losses, not invasion? Me. She said oil will be needed. Doesn't sound like subs. 2. Remarks. I used to be a whiz in geography at school, only I didn't know the half of it. Why some of these places in foreign countries can be spelled 3 or 4 different ways. The letters are different from the Roman alphabet, you see. And of course we have to make sure we use a standard system, or the men using the maps would get confused. Comments. Works for Army Map Service. Me. Could be Russian, Japanese, Chinese, or Arabic. None of them use the Roman alphabet. Arab. The Russians can take care of making their own maps. We're a long way from invading Japan. Likewise from getting a big army into China. Looks like Arabic? North Africa? Me. Yes. I've seen one place spelled different ways in the papers. Aguila, El Aguila, Al Aguila, etc. 3. Remark. Mrs. Fielding, you're French. What is this man Darlin like? Comments. Works in State Department. Me. Is she usually interested in political figures? Arab. No. Me. Does she speak French? Did she pronounce it right, or like a southerner saying darling? Arab. Doesn't speak French. Mrs. Fielding pronounced it the same way she did, so I suppose she had it right. Why? Me. She's heard people discussing Darlan, or she wouldn't be interested. Important people. At the State Department, perhaps. Arab. Who is Darlan? Me. Admiral of French Navy. Guy to be watched in any North Africa invasion. More important than Pétain or Laval in North Africa. 4. Remark. You'd never guess how many odd things rate as strategic materials. Like pyrethrum. That's the basis for a lot of insect powders and sprays. The war cut off most of our imports, and there was a lot of trouble about it. We sent out a big report on it yesterday. Comments. Works for Board of Economic Warfare. Me. Why add this? Arab. Pyrethrum is grown in North Africa and Dalmatia. Why a big report on pyrethrum now, unless we're invading a place where we can get some? 5. Remark. I haven't heard from Jack in weeks. I'm afraid the next letter I get will have an APO address. Comment. Works for OWI. Doesn't matter in this case. Me. I don't get this. Arab. Jack, previously identified as 2nd Lieutenant in Armored Infantry Battalion of 1st Armored Division, last reported at Indio, California. Me. Oh, that's the Desert Training Center. Guess where the 1st Armored is going. 6. Remark. This V-mail is really wonderful. Of course, it's taken time for it to catch on, but we're getting ready to handle a big increase. Comments. Works for AGO. Arab. AGO handles V-mail. Big increase means a lot more troops going over. 7. Remark. Me have a thrilling job? I don't know what's thrilling about typing requisitions for goggles and mosquito bars all day. Comments. Me. Goggles for sand or dust, mosquito bars for tropical or semi-tropical countries. Put 'em together and they spell desert. I hear they got one in North Africa. 8. Remark. Almost every boy I knew at college went Navy. Funny, out of that bunch I went with, 5 got duty skippering something called Higgins boats. They were so disgusted at first, they wanted PT boats. One of them was coming down this weekend, but His leave was cancelled. Comments. Works for WPB. Doesn't matter in this case. Me. Higgins boats are Higgins landing boats, to land troops on hostile shore. Arab. A leave being cancelled always makes me feel an operation is on. 9. Remark. Those German tanks aren't so tough. After all, we haven't been asleep. We've got new tank destroyers, you know. Comments. Works for ordnance. Me. No, I didn't know we had new tank destroyers. When was it announced? Arab. Oh, Andy, I could have bitten my tongue off when it slipped out. 10. Remark. They pick such funny names for warships, like Jean Bart. Imagine naming a warship for a girl. Comments. Works for Navy. Arab. Over my head, why pick this? Me. It's not a girl's name. Jean is a masculine name in French. The Jean Bart is a French battleship known to be at Casablanca in Morocco. She's heard some talk about it in the Navy Department, or done a report mentioning it. We land at Casablanca for one. 11. Remark. I thought we'd have a grand weekend, but Eddie could only get a 6-hour pass, so my trip wasn't really worthwhile. And he was so miserable. Everybody in his outfit had more inoculations. Comments. Works for Treasury. Doesn't matter in this case. Me. What outfit, buddy? Arab. The 34th Infantry Division. Me. Kiss the boys goodbye. They're in a staging area getting processed before going overseas. 12. Remark. We had quite a requisition for silver stars somebody's taking somewhere. Comments. Works for Quartermaster Corps. Arab. Lots of medals, lots of men, right? Me. Yes. Silver stars for gallantry in action. Commanding general would take them. It means infantry, artillery, tanks. Air forces go in more for DFC and air medal. 13. Remark. It's not just a matter of shipping any old locomotives. American locomotives won't run on some of these narrow-gauge railroads. Comments. Works for Transportation Corps. Me. Notable area for narrow-gauge railroads. North Africa. Arab. Russia? Me. Russia has wide gauge. 14. Remark. They've had the poor boy climbing down some kind of nets from ships for weeks, he wrote me. Comments. Works for OCD. Doesn't matter in this case. Me. This one slipped by field censor. He climbs down cargo nets into Higgins landing boats. Has she ever mentioned his outfit? Arab. 1st Infantry Division. His letter was from Scotland. 15. Remark. I had to type a report on red and black scorpions, and it made my skin just crawl. Comments. Works for U.S. Public Health Service. Arab. More North Africa? Me. Looks as if. 16. Remark. They have the cutest little tractors and scrapers they carry in planes. Comments. Works for Army Air Forces. Me. And they build the cutest airfields at a moment's notice while the enemy isn't expecting it. 17. Remark. I wish I didn't have a job where I hear so much. It scares me to death. I haven't been talking in my sleep this last week, have I? Comments. Works for Maritime Commission. Arab. I could have shot her. We all know her boss has something to do with scheduling sailings of merchant ships. She might just as well have come right out and said they've been collecting ships for a huge convoy. I finished reading and growled. Nobody mentioned D-Day. We're going to put the enemy to all the trouble of finding out all by himself when we land in North Africa. Andy, I'm so scared I don't quite know what all this adds up to. They mean a huge operation. Witness V-mail, a lot of silver stars, many cargo ships being collected, and a big demand for oil. And how much points to North Africa? Pocket guide to North Africa, maps probably using Arabic place names, Admiral Darlan, pyrethrum, 1st Armored Division trained for desert warfare, goggles and mosquito bars, narrow-gauge railroads, reports on scorpions, battleship Jean Bart, which even gives us one landing place, Casablanca, but it sounds like a lot of landings. And it also sounds as if we're going in to stay, doesn't it? What else have we found out? Well, it's a joint Army-Navy operation. The boys climb down the cargo nets into landing boats, grab beachheads, build airfields with airborne equipment, throw new tank destroyers at Germans. Among those present will be the 1st Armored Division, the 1st Infantry Division, now in Scotland, and the 34th Infantry Division. We catch Rommel in a vice between the invasion forces and the British 8th Army from Egypt. It's all right to say it sounds thrilling, isn't it, Andy? It sounds thrilling to tell a guy you're going to smack him in the jaw, but sometimes it works out better to smack him first. Andy,
Either Renee or Joey was around at the various times I picked up these remarks. Do you think they picked them all up too?
Well, that's their job. They may have missed some, but they may have some you missed. And don't forget, this may be only part of the story plain Mr. Jones has. He may have other sources of gossip, and he can get a lot of background material through his clipping bureau.
Do you think they'll raid your room upstairs if they already have all this information?
Uh-huh. They've got to take a chance, if they've figured out the North African story. If they have, they know the same stories and the notes I'm supposed to have taken. If I haven't figured out the pattern, they've got to stop me from doing it. And they must feel sure I haven't, or the government would be landing on their necks by now. The only question is, have the Jones boys got the pattern? If they have, get ready to duck.
And if they have, do you think they've sent word to Germany?
I doubt it. I don't think the pattern showed clearly enough until yesterday or today, and they can't just pick up a phone and call Berlin. It'll take time to get a message on the way. Have you heard anything upstairs?
Not a sound, Andy.
Well, anyway, we don't have to wait here anymore. We've got plenty of evidence. I turned out the lights by turning the bulbs in their sockets, because the click of a switch can sound loud in a quiet house, and we crept upstairs and eased the door open. The house was still, not a pleasant stillness, but as if a dozen people were holding their breath. We waited minutes without hearing anything. Then we sneaked into the black living room. I found the phone and lifted it gently from the cradle. Arab's body pressed close to me, warm and reassuring. It was just a matter now of giving a number and speaking a few sentences, and... Arab must have felt me go rigid. Her lips moved against my ear.
"What is it?"
she whispered. I didn't answer. I would have traded the world's greatest music for the purr of electricity in that receiver. But there was nothing. Nothing at all. Just an ugly, dead silence. Arab breathed.
"Is the wire cut?"
Yes. Her lips touched mine in the darkness.
"It's been fun, Andy,"
she said, and I heard the snick of the safety catch on her Smith & Wesson going out of business. I replaced the phone carefully, and as my fingers relaxed, I heard a faint squeaking. Arab touched my arm and said,
"Somebody's raising that window."
We inched across the dark room and flattened against the wall, one on each side of the window. The sash made a tiny wailing noise like a far-off banshee. The noise ended at last, and the shade went up, unrolling a gray carpet of light across the room. A face floated in the opening like something conjured up for a seance. A face with wide, frightened eyes. It was Renee Fielding. End of section 6. Section 7 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 7. She looked around but didn't give her eyes enough time to adjust completely to the blackness. Then she climbed in. Arab and I couldn't have worked it better with a rehearsal. I plastered my right hand over Renee's mouth and grabbed her wrist with my left. Arab locked her other wrist and whispered a few threats in her ear. Renee didn't struggle. We walked her quietly away from the window. A watcher outside would have had to be very close to have noted anything suspicious. We edged slowly down the cellar steps until our feet scraped concrete. Arab said to Renee,
"Will you be quiet if we don't tie or gag you?"
Renee nodded.
"All right," Arab said. "But if you scream, you'll be sorry. I'm not soft-hearted like Andy."
I let her go, and Renee said huskily,
"Why should I scream? When I do not come out, they will know something has happened. They will come after me. What does a half-hour more or less matter?"
"I used to know a swell song," I growled. "It was called Marseillaise. It never used to sound like the Horst Wessel song. Are they the same now?" She looked at me with sleepless eyes.
"I have forgotten the tune. We of the new Europe have no songs."
"I used to know a swell guy, too. A big kid from Dartmouth named Bob Fielding. He married the prettiest girl who ever walked through the door of Zelly's. He was killed in Spain. I thought he was killed fighting the Germans."
"Everything gets killed fighting Germans."
"This might be a good time to see how they like being killed."
"How would you like your family to be threatened with the concentration camp if you didn't obey orders?" Renee asked bitterly. "The Nazis wanted me to work for them.
I could get in this country because marrying Bob had made me an American citizen. I held out for almost 5 months. How long would you have held out with your parents' lives at stake? This is a good time to make another choice. She shivered. The Germans cannot be beaten. They would kill me. They would kill my family. You know what all this excitement is about, don't you? Yes. Landings in French North Africa. It's the first step toward bringing France back to life. The Germans will kill your troops. Has your crowd got word out yet? Not yet. We did not realize it was North Africa until today. It takes time to arrange to send a message. Either there must be a U-boat contact, or the message must be sent by short wave direct to Germany. I tried to make my voice sound casual. Short wave to Germany is a little dangerous, isn't it? Yes, the sending station may be spotted, although we use a directional antenna. I do not think that the message will be sent that way. There will be a U-boat contact tomorrow night. It is safer to give the message to the U-boat and let them radio from offshore. She was so certain that we were trapped that she wasn't being careful. If I could avoid a hint that this was cross-examination, she might spill plenty. Well, I said, a little drive to the seashore won't be hard for you to take. The weather is still nice. It takes too long. I do not like driving 5 or 6 hours. Yeah, you get to thinking it's not that far, but actually it's a good long way to down around Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach? It's not there, it's in New... She chopped off the sentence and said, The more I tell you, the less chance you will have. I do not think you have much chance now. Then what's the harm in a friendly talk? She didn't answer, and I turned to Arab and complained, I booted that one, didn't I? Well, anyway, it's New York or New Jersey. Nobody could have done any better, Andy. It was just... Listen. I cut short and inhaled. I don't hear anything, I whispered. Arab picked up the Smith & Wesson. I want to make sure. She crept up the steps and crouched at the cellar door. Then she turned and whispered, Get the flashlight from my pocketbook. I got the flashlight and went back to the cellar stairs to see what she wanted with it. The stairway was empty. I took the steps 3 at a time. Just as I reached the top, the lock clicked into its keeper. Arab, I whispered, come back here. From the other side of the door, she whispered back, We've got to make a break for it. I'm going out the back door. If anybody outside tries to stop me, I'm going to shoot. Open one of the front cellar windows. If you hear any shots or noise, get out and run. A big disturbance out back ought to make them forget the front. If anybody's going to draw them off, I'm going to do it. Open this door. No, darling. I'm the one who can shoot, so I'm going first. I'm going to kick this door down if... Andy. Well? Andy, this is bigger than either of us. One of us has to get away, and this is the best chance. Promise me you won't run around to the back and try to help me. You open this door. Andy, you couldn't help. You haven't a gun. We'd both get caught. And we've got thousands more people to think about than ourselves. Promise. I took a deep, shuddering breath. All right. Andy, if anything happens, I'm sorry I used to steal the covers from you and use up all the bath towels after a shower. Quit it, you idiot, I mumbled. Give me a minute to get the cellar window open, will you? No, darling. That would give you time to make the first break. 30 seconds, and I'm starting to count now. Good luck, darling. Her feet moved stealthily away from the door. I raced downstairs, counting. Renee couldn't have heard our whispered conversation, so I merely shoved her into a back corner and told her not to budge. I grabbed a hatchet from the tool shelf, turned out the electric light bulb, and jumped to the front window. 20 seconds gone. It took 10 more to loosen the blackout shades and lift the hinged window quietly. There was still no sound from the back of the house. I hoisted myself up into the window well and crouched to take a quick survey. Bushes and trees were stiff, black cutouts against the night sky. Arab must be okay so far. I jumped out and streaked for the nearest patch of trees. And then from the rear of the house came the flat, vicious slaps of a gun. A man screamed. If it had been Arab's voice, I couldn't have gone on. But it was a man, and she might be getting through. A shadow moved in front of me, moving too slowly, too late. He had been starting toward the rear of the house. I saw the faint blue gleam of a gun, but he never got a chance to use it. I whirled the hatchet at him, heard a thud. The white smudge of his face vanished, and I raced past into the trees. All the way down the slight hill and across the meadow, I had to keep telling myself I hadn't any right to go back. There had been only 3 shots, and they had sounded as if they came from the same gun. I was sure it had been Arab's. She could have broken through. The car was in the field where I had left it. I raced the motor, slammed through the hedge bordering on the field, and went roaring back toward Washington. Colonel Parker was my best bet. His house was only 4 miles away near Fort Myer. I skidded into his driveway less than 5 minutes later. My pounding and bell ringing brought him to the door at a run, wrestling with the cord of a bathrobe. He took one look at me and snapped, "What happened?" "It's that Q Street business, Colonel. They've got the North African invasion spotted," and he yanked me inside. "Keep your voice down. My God, is it really North Africa?" "Sir, they've put together a lot of loose talk. And maybe they've got my wife and... I handed him the scraps of paper on which Arab and I had made our notes. He glanced at them, threw a few questions at me, and went to work on the phone. He talked to half a dozen people and finally hung up and said, "We'll have the houses on Q Street in a bag in 10 minutes. About your wife." He cleared his throat and said gruffly, "Good kid, isn't she? Is somebody gonna look out for her, Colonel?" "2 companies from Meyer are being turned out right now. They'll comb the whole countryside around Falls Church." "Sir, wasn't it possible to find out anything about that gang before all this happened?" "There wasn't anything to find out. They didn't try to steal plan or arrange for sabotage. They just listened to loose talk. A lot of investigation of their pasts was being done. We'd already found out that Joey Rader was a Franco volunteer in the Spanish Revolution. He flew with the Condor Legion, the State Department said. But he couldn't be jailed for that. Well, let's have your story from the beginning." They questioned me again and again on what Renee had let slip about routes and the speeds of cars, and finally they worked out a radius of operations based on the 5 or 6 hours drive Renee had mentioned. It swung in a great arc from Washington, cutting part way up the Long Island coast and swinging down the Jersey and Maryland beaches and the long Cape Charles Peninsula across Virginia and into North Carolina. Orders went out to watch the roads. Nobody seemed hopeful, though, because I hadn't been able to describe any car the gang might be using except Joey's Roadster. A Navy 4-striper came in with blue water charts. Theoretical locations for shortwave stations were picked along the suspected shorelines, and the possible beams to Europe were plotted. Somebody said, "With ships listening in here and here and here and here, we can intercept any signals. We get a fast resection on the sending station. We flash word to the Eastern Defense Command and Eastern Sea Frontier. We have the coast blanketed with planes and the inshore patrol, and we blast the station." "How long will all that take?" "Not long. We'll have a few minutes to go on. They can't just press a key and get Deutschlandsender. They've got to send out all call letters and get acknowledged." "We can't blanket part of Long Island and all Jersey and Maryland and Virginia and part of North Carolina." "We don't have to. I can see them making Long Island in 5 or 6 hours at 35 miles an hour. Driving fast these days attracts attention. I say blanket New Jersey and cover the rest as well as we can with what's left." "We're betting heavy on shortwave. What about the U-boat?" "If it's not a radio job, they'll have to flash visible signals or get a boat in or out. We'll fix things so we can count every minnow coming and going." "We'd better," someone said grimly. End of section 7. Section 8 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 8. The conference started breaking up after that. Colonel Parker checked the situation at the Crowley house and had to tell me that the troops had found nothing. The Jones gang and Arab had vanished. A detail had been left at the house to keep an eye on things and to continue the search after dawn, but it looked hopeless. I drove back slowly to the Crowleys. I couldn't get it through my head that Arab might be merely a small, huddled shape somewhere, her bright hair stirring only when the night breeze fingered it. Things like that couldn't happen to Arab. It was unthinkable. She was the sort of being who ought to go on, forever young and gay, like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy of the Wizard of Oz. I turned into the long lane to the Crowley house, and suddenly my nerves twanged like high-tension wire. I mashed the brake pedal to the floor. My headlights had gleamed on a small white sports shoe lying by the side of the road. It was Arab's. I got out, bent to pick it up. It was too late when I saw the inch-thick broken branch. Too late when I heard the rustle of the bush beside me. There was nothing but a ringing blackness, and then quiet. My eyelids opened creakily like the cover of an old-fashioned roll-top desk. Something was goggling down at me. Its face was blurred, but I could see flat eyes like those of a huge fish in an aquarium. I blinked and took one last round trip on the swing and then got my eyes focused. The fat man was staring down at me. "Did you like my little trap?" he asked. I tried to ask where Arab was and couldn't. My tongue wouldn't bend around the words. I moved my jaws and felt pressure against the corners of my mouth. I had been gagged. My hands and feet were tied, and I was lying on the floor of a car. "We are going to the seashore," he said. "Until now, it was easy to bring a live body as a dead one. But if you make any disturbance, it will be different. I have gone to much trouble to get you. It was not easy to dodge your troops while waiting for you to return. I have gone to much unnecessary trouble to bring you, when all that was needed was to keep you from talking any more." I tried to look completely unconcerned. He didn't know about the remarks Renee had let slip in the cellar. There was no way he could have known unless Renee had confessed. We were going to the seashore hangout, and he didn't suspect that its existence was no longer a secret. I stared around. Nobody else seemed to be in the car. It was daylight, perhaps early noon. There was no sign of Arab. He said, "If you are quiet, you will see your wife later. It was stupid of Renee not to realize that you two were married. You are to lie still. I have no time for foolishness. It is a long drive, and I must go slowly and must use only side roads." He tucked a blanket back over me, covering me from head to foot, returned to the front, and drove on. I lost track of time. Twice I heard the sound of cities and felt the cars stopping for traffic lights. It might have been Wilmington and Philadelphia. Then there was nothing to notice for ages. I worked a corner of the blanket back finally. It was dark. The air was thick and sweet with salt smells. The car tilted upward and dull thunder rumbled under the wheels. It sounded like the boards of a wooden bridge. We must be crossing one of the wide Jersey bays to an island. The car went on for a while, then stopped. The fat man peeled back the blanket, untied my ankles, and pulled me out of the car. My legs wobbled. My feet tripped in sand. Half a mile to the rear curved a bay with tiny waves glittering like sequins under the starlight. To the right and left, sand dunes and bayberry bushes stretched off endlessly. Ahead was the mumble of surf and the dark bowl of a big old house. "We are lonesome here," he said. "Nothing but dunes for a mile each way. The rum runners used it in Prohibition." He pushed me up a trail through the bayberry bushes. "The Powell house," he said, pointing to a low concrete building near the house. "The rum runners stored liquor there. Observe the loopholes near the roof of the Powell house in case what they call hijackers." They were lawless times. We entered the house. The downstairs rooms were dimly lighted, empty. Blackout shades covered windows and doors. When we started upstairs, boards squalled underfoot as if we were treading on cats. "Joey!" the fat man called. A voice answered from the third floor. "Here, Chief." "Come to the map room, you and Renee. Bring the girl." "Okay, Chief." On the second floor, the fat man opened the door of a big room and shoved me in ahead of him. A desk lamp was glowing, but no one was present. This was the fat man's birch Tesgarten. This was where he sat like a plump white toadstool brewing poison. In one corner stood a glass case containing several revolvers, a shotgun, 4 rifles, a Tommy gun, and even a hand grenade. In another corner gleamed the panels of a shortwave transmitter. Maps and filing cases lined the walls, and I didn't have to be told that the files contained the choice items picked up by its clipping bureau. The fat man said, "Sit in that straight chair, Lieutenant." He untied the gag and complained, "You have caused much trouble, Lieutenant." I worked my tongue around a few times and then managed to say thickly, "Yeah, I don't have much hope of winning an Iron Cross." "I do not understand it. You are not unusually strong. You're not intelligent. Witness, for example, the way you took the bait of your wife's shoes by the road. Sure, I'm just the scrub team. Think what our first team will do to you babies. Your first team will never land in North Africa. What you have done will have no effect on that. But you have destroyed my usefulness here. I plan to leave tonight. Now listen carefully. There is little room on a U-boat. I will be aboard, and Renee and Joey. There might be room for 2 more if the 2 are sensible, if... Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and somebody gasped and ran across the room behind me. A shawl of bright hair tumbled over my face. An Arab was laughing and crying, and her lips were fluttering against mine.
"Andy,"
she sobbed.
"Andy, are you all right? Are you hurt?"
Nothing wrong, I said, but paralysis of the brain. How are things going?
It could be worse.
Joey grumbled. What'd you bring him for, Chief? To keep him from talking, because he may be useful, because it amused me. Joey scowled at me, yanked Arab away, and jammed her into another chair. Sit down, he snapped. If you want to see Jack here, mussed up, just make another pass at him. The fat man laughed. It was like the gurgling of water in drain pipes. Joey has trouble with his women, he said. He has to keep them tied up, or they run to another man, or else fight Joey. There is something to be said for a woman who will fight, however. Isn't there, Renee? I twisted my head around. Renee walked slowly into the room. Her eyes were black smudges.
"I do not know what you mean," she said.
I mean the way you failed to fight after these 2 caught you in the lieutenant's house. You did not struggle, you gave no warning, and you were not gagged and tied. She whispered.
"I was afraid."
His voice was soft and happy. When I have time, he said, we must talk about you being afraid. He touched her glowing black hair, caressed her throat. The idea of fear must have excited him. Chief, Joey said, I don't like leaving this desk doughboy around with his legs free. Tie his ankles, then. Joey brought out some cords from his pocket and began trying to saw through my ankles with them. I don't like it, he complained. There's only 2 of us, and this guy is mean. He almost killed Winter with that hatchet. Winter was stupid, the fat man said. He thought only with his biceps. It is necessary to think with the biceps and with the head, as I do. Joey grumbled something. The fat man kicked him and yelled, As I do, pig! Did you hear me? Joey tumbled backward. Yeah, Chief, sure, he stammered. No, nobody can touch you. The fat man nodded, calmed. Biceps are merely tools, he said. It is not enough to use force only, the way our stupid junker generals and admirals do. The head must turn the enemy's strength against him, as Himmler and I do, as we turn America's strength against herself. Big, strong, stupid America, boasting of her power. We turn the boasts against her, the loose talk, the bragging. Arab made me think of kids at high school graduations, feet and knees pressed demurely together, soft shoulder-length blonde hair escaping from a little girl ribbon, hands in long white gloves crossed on her lap. But they weren't gloves. Her hands had been wrapped with layers of adhesive tape, and her wrists had been crossed and taped. She couldn't wriggle anything but her thumbs. I asked, How did they catch you?
I slipped out of the back door and went maybe 20 steps, and a man jumped toward me. I shot at him, and he screamed, and then I turned and saw plain Mr. Jones right behind me, and that's all I remember.
Judging from the yell, I said, you hit the first guy. Joey shivered. She winged him all right.
I suppose, Arab said, they're hidden away somewhere around Washington. They'll be picked up, won't they, Andy?
Sure.
Andy, is there a chance for us?
I shook my head. I didn't dare hint that the Sea Frontier and Defense Command people were alerted. And for New Jersey. There might even be a chance of help from the land, although it wasn't likely. It would take 10 divisions to comb the long New Jersey coastline, and there wasn't nearly enough time for that. No chance, I said. Sorry. The fat man had been in a kind of trance all this time. Now he spoke sharply, shrilly, to someone in his dream world. No chance, he echoed. There is every chance. Give us the Wehrmacht, and the Luftwaffe, and the Navy, and we will give you the world. Kill the Schwein Canaris, and Goring and the others who hate us. Call on us! Call on the Gestapo to save—"
"Chief! Chief!"
Joey cried. The fat man shook himself. The blind glasses swiveled slowly toward Joey. "Yes?"
"Chief, you started having one of those spells again. You were working yourself up about Canaris and the others. And it's late. It's past 11. You gotta be on the ball for the contact, and there we gotta figure out what to do afterward."
The fat man was awake now. "Afterward," he said, "we will start back to Germany."
"On that sub?" Joey asked. "Look, those things got a habit of dunking themselves 3 times and coming up twice. And I'm just beginning to get friendly with the dame here."
"We will take her and the lieutenant. They will be able to give us much helpful information after we teach them to be sensible. Turn out the lights, Joey, and raise the shades." The room blacked out, and Joey raised the shades. The windows were broad and high. The Atlantic filled the room with a misty, reflected glow. The rising moon swung low in the sky like a shard of yellow pottery, inlaying the waves with chromium patterns. Somewhere out there, the convoys were on the first lap of their voyage. I could guess the course. A feint toward Iceland, one toward Dakar, another at England. The subs would spot them, of course. You can't hide 1,000 ships. But the Nazis wouldn't know where the Armada would strike. Back in Kiel and Wilhelmshaven, the German undersea lords would go slowly crazy over their charts and colored pins, because one wolf pack, or even 2 or 3, wouldn't dent the convoys. It would take every Unterseeboot that could turn a diesel and get off a tin fish to stop this fleet. And to mass the U-boats would take time. 2 or 3 days' warning would be useless. They needed a week at least. If everything clicked, somewhere off Gibraltar, the convoys would meet other task forces from English ports. 1,000 ships would blast through scattered U-boats and spill a tidal wave of flame and steel on the beaches of North Africa. But if the subs were massed, waiting off Gibraltar... The fat man was setting up a tripod topped by oversized binoculars. He took a compass bearing, adjusted the binoculars, south-southeast. I stared across the glimmer of waves. Nothing showed. Of course, the sub might be lying well out, decks awash. Plain Mr. Jones hadn't touched the shortwave transmitter, so the contact must be by visual signal. That was one of the things the Sea Frontier and Defense Command were healed for. What the fat man and the sub-commander could see, our boys could spot just as well. And there had to be destroyers and corvettes off the coast. There had to be. End of Section 8. Section 9 of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 9. I stared out to sea and thought I spotted a shadow. Chills whisked across my skin. There was a shadow. It was just entering the moon lane, east by north of the house. A black sliver of steel, easing across the chromium-tipped waves. It carried 4 tilted funnels. That meant only one thing. Out there, one of the World War tin cans was snuffling through the waves, saving her strength like an old bird dog. She must be 4 miles north of the spot where the fat man expected his sub. I tried to pray her south. The silhouette narrowed suddenly. She was swinging north again. Sweat stung my eyes. By the time I blinked them clear, the moon lane was empty. The fat man stooped, fumbled with a floor plug. "This," he said, "is a nice application of a well-known principle." I thought, "Go on, show off. You'll still get in trouble when you start flashing lights." He said, "It is the same principle by which doors open when a beam of light is interrupted." I began to feel sick. He wasn't playing with oversized binoculars. It was something tricky. "We have here," he said, "a piece of signaling equipment." He chuckled. "The lieutenant has been hoping for a wild display of lights. He has been hoping that I would not see the destroyer to the northeast. You could have your whole 5-ocean navy out there, and it would not matter. It is almost impossible to spot a periscope at night, and that is all that our friends will show until everything is safe." I said hoarsely, "After this build-up, your gadget better produce black magic at least." "Red magic," he said. "It produces a beam of infrared light. To send signals, one merely interrupts the beam. Nothing can see the beam except a photoelectric cell through a lens fitted with the proper filter. One set is here, one on the U-boat. He peered at his watch. 11:15, he said. The contact spot is carefully charted. Our friends will be cruising there at periscope depth. We will not be interrupted. He bent, looked through the eyepiece of the set. Arab whispered,
Andy, is there really a destroyer out there?
He says so. Listen, Chief, if you get destroyer fever, how will we board your sub? First, the fat man said, I will make my report, in case of accidents. Then, if everything looks safe, I will have them send in a rubber boat. If the destroyer stays around, I will send its position, and we will see what new torpedoes do to old warships. We'll never get aboard if there's torpedoing. Oh, yes, it will be easier. If the ocean is filled with survivors, who will suspect a rubber boat? Ooh, ah! He had a contact. His right index finger tapped a key. It was frightening. No flash, no crackle of electricity, just silent, broken streaks of infrared beaming out to sea, reflecting down through the prisms of a periscope, coming out as dots and dashes from a photoelectric cell. There must be some way to stop him, some way to take his own strength and turn it against himself, the way he liked to do with others. There must be. I laughed. I put everything into it. It had to be good enough to start him on the way to one of his hysterical spells, and so I laughed. Laughed while my throat ached. He turned and said, What is it? Why do you laugh? You're doing a great job, I snickered. Do you know what kind of decoration you'll get for it? He moved toward me. Pudgy fingers squirmed like tentacles. Yes, he said. I will be given the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. His voice lifted half an octave. You think I will not get it? You think the work does not demand it? Oh, sure. The work demands it, but you won't get it. The fingers coiled at my throat. Go on, choke me, I yelled. It won't change things. The sub-commander will get the Knight's Cross. You know what crosses you'll get? The double cross. The fingers relaxed. What do you mean? He said thickly. You got big stuff there. You hand it to the sub-commander. Where's your receipt? What's to stop him from taking all the credit? You work for Himmler? Who does he work for? Canaris, Admiral Canaris, German Naval Intelligence. Oh, that's swell. You know that secret radio station inside Germany that blasts Himmler every week? The one on which Gustav Siegfried Eins does his stuff? How does it keep going? How does it last 5 minutes? His hands went to work on a phantom deck. The High Command is behind that station, he snarled. They hate us. Sure. You think that sub-commander will give you and Himmler a build-up? Like hell. Naval Intelligence will steal the credit. They'll use it to cut Himmler's throat with the Führer. They'll say they got the dope from men off torpedoed ships. I made my voice sound low and nasty. And do you know what happens to you? I know. His body was twitching, jerking. What happens? His voice skirled up suddenly. What happens? I sneered. The commander of that sub sees you coming out in the rubber boat he sent for you. He yells, Tricked! The Americans have seized that boat. 10 rounds rapid fire. Blam, 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 blam. Stop it! He screamed. Joey cried. Don't let him upset you, Chief. The blind glasses glared at Joey. The fat man's voice sounded as if he were yelling through a blanket. Wyatt, who do you work for, me or Canaris? I begin to wonder. We will see who gets the credit. He ran to the shortwave set, flipped switches. Joey said, It ain't safe. They can pick that stuff up. A chance in 100. One destroyer cannot police the shortwave bands. It would take 10, 20. Dials glowed on the set, reflecting greasily on his face. Renee, he called. She whispered, Yes. The commander may be worrying. Signal him to stand by. I do not know how. A long press on the button for a dash. A short press for a dot. It is plain international code. There is a handbook on my desk. She slipped past my chair like a pale shadow, found the book, and went to the infrared set. Joey got her a flashlight. She masked the beam with her hand, studied the international code, and began sending slowly, going back to the page for each new letter. The big shortwave set was warming up now. It purred like a giant cat. The fat man touched dials, clamped a receiver over one ear. His fingers tested the sending key. "Joey!" he snapped.
"Here, Chief."
"The code book in the lower right-hand drawer." He flipped keys at Joey. "Get it, and paper and pencil. This cannot go in the clear. Encode it. First sentence, Jones to Ulrich. Second sentence, for Himmler only. Third sentence, huge task forces sailed last 3 days from East Coast ports of embarkation. Fourth sentence, objective absolutely confirmed. French North Africa. Encode that, and quickly. There will be more."
"Okay, Chief."
The fat man's fingers had not stopped for a second. He was sending call letters. Dit-da-dit, da-da, dit-da-dit, da-da. I could picture the impulses leaping over the Atlantic in huge vertical zigzags. Out there were Navy radio men combining segments of the shortwave bands, waiting for the whine of power in their ears and the crackle of an enemy message. Dit-da-dit, da-da, dit-da-dit, da-da. Now and then he threw words at Joey, who scribbled them down and hunted through the secret code book for the right signal. Dit-da-dit, da-da, dit-da-dit, da-da. It seemed to go on forever. Renee finished sending with the infrared set, moved over to watch Joey encoding. Suddenly there was a change. The fat man jerked upright. His sending hand stilled, quivering. He listened. He had been acknowledged. Far away in Germany they were ready for him. He ripped back a jerky stream of dots and dashes. His hand reached out for the first sheet of the coded message. Heat lightning flickered on the horizon to the northeast. My skin tingled. Heat lightning at 30 minutes to November. It might have been 4 miles away. I would know in 10 to 15 seconds. I counted. Maybe I counted aloud, or maybe something in the way I strained forward registered with the group at the radio. They swung around, peered at me. I hardly noticed. They were just blurs in the room. I counted. 9, 10, 11, 12. Then it happened. Out on the sandbar, 2 cones of water foamed up into the night air. Windows jumped in frames. Sound thudded at us. Baroom! And I went nuts. "They got a fix on us!" I screamed. "Come on, boys, pour it in. Lay it in their laps. You got the radio tagged, let 'em have it." The fat man leaned over me, snarling something, I didn't care what. I rocked deliriously in the chair and howled up at him. "Watch this one, Jonesy. Get to the window and watch it. Open your mouth and they'll drop one in. Hee-ha-ha-ho! Right 108-800. Fire!" He jerked around like a puppet on strings. Lightning glared again on the horizon. Black powder lightning in the Navy 5-inchers. "On the way!" I shrieked. "Count it, you rats! 12 seconds to live. 1, 2... I went on counting and raving half-forgotten artillery commands while the room turned into a madhouse. The fat man grabbed his infrared set. He screamed orders to collect papers, to run to the powerhouse. I heard him howl at Joey to shoot us before leaving. 8, I yelled. 9. The fat man tumbled through the door. His feet clattered on the stairs. 11, 12. Twin screeches rode the air overhead. The roof seemed to lift to meet them. Blam! Glass jingled, and the old house rocked and groaned like a schooner slamming onto a shoal. "Hurry up, Joey," I chanted. "Hurry up, that was 100 over. Hurry up, they got their bracket now. Left 5, 8, 700. Hurry up, Joey." He flopped around the room like a drunken rooster. I noticed Renee. She was standing motionless at the window, looking out to sea. Moonlight gilded her face. For the first time she looked calm, almost happy. The brief glow washed the horizon once more. "On the way," Renee said softly. I turned to Arab. In the dim room, her hair seemed to glow like phosphorus. Her head was tilted, chin up. For a moment, she and Renee could have been sisters. They faced the ocean almost eagerly, like lovely, delicate figureheads on the old china clippers. "Hold your hat," I said. She smiled. "I'd rather hold your hand." I wish I could think of something deathless to say. "I love you, Andy." "And I love you." "That's nice enough," she said. She was still smiling at me when everything let go at the seams. Something pumped the air out of my lungs, picked me up, chair and all, and slammed me against the wall. I lay there, dizzy for a time. At first, I could get only a sip of air. I worked at it, got a little more, and finally a great big shuddering one which put me back into circulation. The chair was kindling wood. I doubled my feet up to my bound hands and worked on the ankle knots. Moonlight seeped in through the shattered windows. Dust drifted like spray. The knot at my ankles loosened. I kicked off the rope, teetered upright. There were no more flickerings on the seaward horizon. The boys had done their job. The signals were off the air, and the four-piper would be tearing inshore to drop a landing party. Fire was eating into timbers somewhere. The crackle was unmistakable. There was another round. Someone was laughing. Soft, liquid notes like a toy piano. I traced the sound to Renee. She was standing in front of the huge map on which the fat man had flagged troop dispositions. The map hung askew, but some of the pins were still in place. Renee was standing in front of it, wavering on her feet. I could hardly believe what I saw. She was drunk with concussion, but she was really alive for the first time since her big Dartmouth kid got killed in Spain. She had collected half a dozen of the little flags representing American divisions. She was poking them back into the map, but not back where they had been before. She was landing a task force in Berlin. The sleepless beauty had come to life. A voice called, "Andy, Andy." Arab was sitting near the door. The blast had skated her chair backward 15 feet without toppling it. I started toward her. Joey uncoiled from the floor, jammed me back against the wall. There was a smear of blood on his face. His jaw hung slackly. He tugged at something in his pocket. "You been asking for it," he mumbled. I looked at Renee and saw that she had turned to watch us. "Good old Joey," I said loudly. "This the kind of shooting you like, isn't it? This the kind you had in Spain? Are you still putting out that yarn about the Heinkels you shot down, or are you telling the real story now?" "You shut up!" "Sure you fought in Spain, if you call it fighting. Heinkels and bombs and machine guns against rifles. Tell us how you mowed 'em down in your Heinkel." "You lie!" he yelled. "I fought for the Loyalists." "The State Department says you fought with the Germans for Franco. Tell us about it. Tell us how you shot Bob Fielding. Tell us about the Condor Legion." Somewhere in the room sounded the telltale dry clack of a rifle being loaded. Joey whirled toward the sound, screamed, "Renee, he can't pin it on me. There were lots of us in the Condor Legion. It could have been anybody. Renee, take it easy. He wrenched the gun out of his pocket. I kicked his elbow a split second too late. He got off one shot before the automatic spun from his hand. Renee quivered. The rifle she had taken from the shattered glass case wavered. Then the barrel came up, steadied. The shots cracked slowly. 6 of them. A click. Joey twitched once on the floor and was still. Arab cried, "She's hurt, Andy." I stumbled across to Renee. She leaned on the desk, jamming a small, stained fist into her side. She said, "There's a knife on the table. You'll have to help me open it." I turned so that she could reach my bound hands without moving. The penknife touched my fingers. I held it while she pried open a blade. Then she took it and sawed through the rope at my wrists. "Take care of your wife," she said, "and hurry." The smoke was thickening. Somewhere in the house, flames coiled and rustled like rattlers. I slashed the cords around Arab's knees and ankles, sliced the tape linking her wrists. The adhesive binding her fingers into boxing glove shape would have to wait. Arab brushed past me and began scooping things from the desk and floor with her mittened hands, and I yelled, "We haven't time for that!" "Don't argue," she said calmly. "I'll be right with you." I knelt beside Joey for a moment and decided that he must have been dead when he hit the floor. Renee was still waiting by the desk. The fist doubled against her side seemed darker. Her body swung up lightly into my arms. I carried her out into the hall. We were lucky. Apparently the shells had burst into the 3rd floor. The smoke wasn't bad, and the flames were above us, not below. I started downstairs. "Bob?" she said suddenly. "Sorry, this is just Andy." "Bob used to carry me like this." "Did he?" "He used to say I ought to try out for the 90-pound team." "You could still make it." "Did you understand that Jones went into the powerhouse?" she whispered. "He took the infrared set with him. He can attach it and signal through one of those slots near the roof." "We'll take care of him." "The door will be open, Andy. He expected Joey and me to follow him." I picked my way through a jumble of furniture on the 1st floor, kicked the back door open. I carried Renee well back from the house and lowered her to the sand. Her eyes were feverish. She whispered,
"I used to be afraid of dying, afraid of what might happen to my people in Brittany, afraid that the Germans could not be beaten. Now I am not afraid. It is worth dying to beat the Germans. Tonight I stood at the window, and when the guns fired the third time, I was not afraid at all."
"Sure," I muttered. "You've got what it takes."
"I'm sorry you saw how I acted with...
She nodded toward the powerhouse.
"With him. It was not really me."
"I know it wasn't."
"Will Bob understand?"
"Sure," I growled. "He'll scrub your chin with his knuckles and tell you to forget it." Feet scuffled the sand beside us, and Arab dropped to her knees, spilling an armful of loot.
"How is she?" she gasped. "I grabbed a tablecloth. Andy, you'll have to rip it into bandages. My fingers—"
Renee pressed the stained fist harder into her side.
"Let me alone," she said sharply. "The U-boat! You must warn the destroyer about it. You must go after that man in the powerhouse."
Arab bent down and kissed her.
"I brought Joey's flashlight," she said, "and the international code you were using. I can handle the flashlight with my thumb. Andy will do the rest."
Renee smiled. Her head drooped onto the sand. Her lips moved. I leaned closer. She was crooning an elfin melody. For a moment I could see Renee and Bob hanging over their balcony, watching moonlight on the Seine and humming a quaint little college song. She whispered it softly.
"Dartmouth will shine tonight. Dartmouth will shine. Dartmouth will shine tonight. Dartmouth will shine. Dartmouth will shine tonight. Dartmouth will shine. When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, Dartmouth will shine."
It was almost gay, almost a challenge. The elfin whisper faded. She lay there quietly, smiling up at the Dartmouth moon. From the look on her face, Bob must have been waiting. I got up stiffly.
"I brought a shotgun,"
Arab said.
"Take it."
"I can't handle a gun." She pushed something into my hand.
"Take this then, please."
It was the grenade from the fat man's arsenal. I stuffed it inside my shirt, walked across white sand to the powerhouse. Now and then the building blurred, and I had to gulp knots out of my throat. The door was ajar. I kicked it wide and went in. The fat man straightened slowly. He had been crouching on a narrow platform, adjusting the infrared set to send through a loophole. Light from a single electric bulb flashed on his glasses. The room was filled with the shudder and whine of the dynamo, and at first I couldn't hear what he was saying. I moved carefully toward the platform, and at last caught a phrase. He was saying, "This time we will not be interrupted." When he saw I wasn't rushing him, he started down the steps. His round, polished head hunched between his shoulders. The fat arms swung out, fingers stroking the air ahead of him. He was 3 steps up when I reached the bottom of the stairs to the platform. Suddenly he whirled, dropped to his hands. A foot lashed at my throat. I was waiting for it. I caught the foot and gave it a flip. He crashed down, but managed to roll part of the shock out of the fall. I nailed him on the bounce with a straight right. His glasses flew off, and I saw his eyes. They were bright blue, and they bulged in their nests of fat. Now I knew why he wore glasses, to keep people from snickering at him. Without them, he looked like a baby getting ready to cry. I chopped hooks into his face and body and couldn't put him down. It was like hitting a huge ball of putty. I got reckless and threw a right at him from the bleachers. He pivoted, caught my fist like a fielder taking a fly over his shoulder. Fingers dug into my wrist. He wrenched at it, trying to straighten my arm, palm upward over his shoulder. Half a turn more and he could snap the elbow joint. I locked a foot around his ankle, ripped hooks into his kidney with my left. His bent back was a sweet target, like pounding a bass drum. He grunted, jerked upright. Teeth ripped my arm. I dug into his kidney once more, and then he whirled around and let me fly off at the wall. I scraped along it and got my balance just in time. He was charging at me. He came blindly, head down, wide open as a dummy, sliding down a wire at a bayonet drill. An uppercut snapped his head back. He pawed at me. His fingertips no longer felt like coiled spring. I pounded him backward. 1 step, 2, 3, and suddenly he turned and ran. ran sobbing along the wall and up the steps onto the platform. At the top, he swung around. I could hear his breath whistling above the dynamo. He jerked and tore at a pocket. He was yanking out his gun. I ripped open my shirt and clamped my fingers around the waffle pattern of the grenade. He had the gun now. It steadied on me. I cocked my arm, thought, "This is for Dartmouth," and I let him have it. Flames slashed at me. A blasting noise seemed to stave in my eardrums like old barrels. I closed my eyes and let things go dark. When I opened them again, ages later, I heard myself mumbling, "I got the guy, I got the guy, I got the guy." Someone tugged at my arm, argued with me. For some reason, I was walking. I complained, "Why don't you let a guy stay in bed after he's blown to bits? This is a hell of an army walking a guy around." The fog swirled around in my head and smoked quietly away. Arab was clinging to my arm. We were walking through sand. The fragment of moon I had seen ages ago was still skimming low through the night sky. I said, "What am I doing here? What about the grenade?"
"It didn't go off. You aren't wounded, really. Just a bitten arm and bruises and—"
"And why didn't it go off? One of your lousy defective ordnance grenades?" She quivered with laughs and sniffles.
"They don't go off unless you pull the pin," she moaned. "You didn't pull the pin."
"How would I know you had to pull a pin? I never fired anything but dummy rounds in a World War 75. What happened to the fat man?" She shuddered.
"Andy, you hit him with it. You must have thrown it like a baseball. You hit him in the head."
"Did I hit him hard?"
"If you can always throw grenades that well, we'll have some special ones made up for you, without pins."
"But I saw a flash and there was an awful blast."
"A .45 makes an awful racket in a closed room."
"He missed me, huh?"
"Yes, darling. And I've been walking you up and down for 5 minutes to wake you up."
"What about the sub?" She pointed out to sea. We were atop one of the dunes. At first all I could see was the blazing house 50 yards to the left. Then I spotted a motor launch. It was just slamming through the breakers. The bow cut the sand and a bunch of guys with fixed bayonets tumbled onto the beach. I peered to the southeast and saw ghostly columns of spray teetering into the sky. They must be depth charges, and the pattern looked highly satisfactory. Arab took a deep breath, clung to me. Her lips felt cool and soothing.
"Andy," she whispered, "I won't ever try to stir things up again. From now on, I'll be a mouse."
I scrubbed a hand over my aching face and looked at the flaming house and depth charges. "If you're going to be a mouse," I said solemnly, "God help the cats." End of section 9 and end of Death Talks Out of Turn by Richard Powell. Read by Ben Tucker.